A very warm welcome once again to all of you to this second installment of the EGF Expert Talk series. And for our panel discussion today, we have four very, very interesting experts who will be sharing their opinions with you shortly. We have Pooja Kapadia, who is a partner TMT with Cyril, Amarchand, Mangaldas. We have Rachana, Rautray, who is a partner with JSA. We have Dhruv Suri, who is a partner with Priti, Suri and Associates. And we have Sarthak Doshi, who is a principal associate with Shardul, Amarchand and Mangaldas and Company. Our moderator for today is going to be Aditi Agrawal. As you all know, she's the founder of the Tech Trace. And with this, I hand it over to Aditi with again a reminder that after the first panel discussion, which will last about 40 minutes, we will move on to session 2, which will be a fireside chat with Gowree Gokhale. And that will be an exclusive question and answer conversation with her. That will begin at about 5 p.m. So without taking any further of everybody's time, I'm handing it over to Aditi Agrawal, our moderator, to start the first panel discussion with our speakers. Over to you, Aditi.
Thanks, Devuti. Thank you all for being here. We will jump right in. If I can request all the panelists to turn on their cameras. Dhruv, I can see you. Sarthak, Rachana, I can see you. I can't see Pooja for some reason. Pooja, in case you're there, can you please say hi? Because I can't.
We can see her.
Yeah, we can see her.
Yeah, we can see her. She's right there.
Google is trying to stifle her speech on my computer, I guess. But anyway, we'll start with a fun exercise. I want you all to quickly categorize these different gameplays as either OMG, and when you say it's an OMG or online money game, you must give the emoji reaction. Dhruv, I think you'd like it, which is OMG. Okay, whether it's an online social game or it's an e-sport, or you're just confused on where it stands, and confusion is perfectly fine. So is Candy Crush, how would you classify Candy Crush?
Social game, but I'm trying to
Online
find the emoji for this. So I'm more concentrated on the emoji.
Yeah.
Okay, forget about the emoji. Concentrate, folks.
I think
Candy
online
Crush,
social.
OSG,
Social game. Online social.
Social game.
social game.
Yeah.
But if I have to watch an ad to play the next level or to get more lives or to burst more candies, is that considered other stakes under the definition of the act?
No.
Not relevant.
No?
Not relevant. It's just a revenue generation stream.
Okay, got it. Is Roblox, how would you classify Roblox?
Again, social. I mean, you could put esports or social. Yeah.
Pooja, Dhruv, I can't hear you, sorry.
I said probably social game.
So yeah, just unmute all four of you, just unmute yourselves for this section. Okay. The fact that I'm buying Robux in order to, I'm spending real money to buy Robux, which could arguably be other stakes. Does that impact the classification in any way?
Do you win something?
The buying.
Legally, no.
Okay.
It depends on if you're earning something out of it ultimately.
Correct. And if you can trade
if you can, go on, Pooja.
it on the secondary market, depends on that as well.
Okay, let's say I go on Roblox, buy Robux, build a little house, then give Sarthak that house and tell him, hey, you can get cool points on the internet, but you pay me 5,000 rupees. Then.
Mostly.
Arguably
Social.
not an OMG. Arguably not an OMG.
Yeah, and still very social. Still very social.
It's very social. Okay, got it. Now on Zomato during IPL, there's this hand cricket thing. And if you win certain number of runs, you get an iPhone or an Apple Watch, I forget. OMG, OSG, esports, or I don't know.
Again, you can do it as social. It depends on how you got to participate on the game. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, mostly OSG unless you are in the orphan category, which is neither.
Okay, got it. There are scratch coupons on Zomato, Swiggy,
Doesn't matter.
which appear only after you place an order. You don't have access to them otherwise. All good, all kosher.
all good.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's
Unless
Okay.
there's some, like if there's a revenue arrangement between Zomato and the coupon seller, and there is like the way they've monetized it.
I mean, if I'm Zomato, why will I offer a Foxtail or a Truefit Hill, etc.? to give coupons on my platform.
See,
if
I think
I'm not
ultimately
earning
it
from
is to do with if your order placement value has some portion of it attributable to the person who's giving you the coupons. So if that connection can be made and that is apparent to the user, then you could possibly say that it could be an OMG as well.
Okay. Spin the wheel on Amazon during Prime Day sale.
Super fun, super social. Super social.
social?
I do it all the time. Don't win anything.
Okay. At this stage, I'm wondering if all four of you are representing all these companies, because none of you would tell me who your clients were. So, anyway, what about loot boxes? Those little treasure chests that appear on games, and you can click on them and get like lives, etc., other coupons, etc., etc.
Again, depends on how they're structured. Maybe social, but really depends on what you get out of it, what you can do from the winnings of the loot box, all of that.
Okay. Okay. In
Yeah.
real life,
Or, sorry, go on.
yeah.
No, I was just saying, or you could argue it's not a game to begin with.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We put
And
it.
there is that also category that Sarthak was talking about, right? Games that probably don't fall under either of the
Yeah.
categories as well.
Yeah, and Dhruv,
Are
I
they-
think it could be not a game to begin with. It's just some digital activity you're
You could
doing.
declassify it. I think what's up, if I could jump in, I think you
Yeah.
declassify it from the game, right? So I think when you're playing a game, there are different elements to the game. Just like when you have questions of, like you said, a Nika has spin the wheel. Nika's business can be separate from spin the wheel. Similarly, you could also break down aspects of a game and have attributes of the game, not even it wouldn't even be a game. What it could then come closer to is a promotional piece. I think that, I mean, of course, speaking for Sarthak here, but yeah, I think that's fine.
So yeah, if I could further nuance it, basically pre-proga, you would classify something like to spin the wheel or a lottery as not a game, because game is understood in a certain way in the Indian jurisprudence, which is different from a betting activity or a contest joining or lottery or spin the wheel.
We are not concerned with the
Yeah,
world now.
so even with the proga, you would still have that classification of what is a game to begin with. Is it entering a lottery a game? I would say you would find arguments that it is not a game. It's lottery.
Is lottery betting, gambling, wagering, and therefore not allowed online under Proga?
See, betting gambling would be a very larger bucket. I'm saying because proga focuses on game, right? That's the center
Games.
point of proga. It starts with the game. You could have arguments like I think the other people on the panel are also trying to allude to, that you could say that it's not a game to begin with. It's either a lottery or it could be, I think game requires some functionalities in terms of gameplay and interaction, which could be deciphered in the example like loot box, right? Depends on how it's structured.
Okay. Is poker in the real world considered a game that's allowed? Or to go back to the old binary, a game of skill or game of chance? I'm sorry, I'm not aware of it. I always get confused.
Skill.
Show of hands if it's game.
It's a game of skill in the format. Yeah.
Oh, it's a game of skill. Okay, therefore Hotstar can legally stream National Poker Championship, which is something that it's been doing.
I think you have to take a step back, and I think it's not, again, like you rightly said, skill versus chance. The only relevance of skill to my mind now in 2026 is skill as you demonstrate for an e-sport. Naturally, no one's going to win the argument that a betting game could qualify under a particular federation under the NSG, and so it's unlikely that unless you can structure the quintessential betting games as a sporting activity of some sense, obtain registration and gain legitimacy. I think overall, any betting type of activity will also have to get vetted under this whole pay in and pay out and what that results in. So when you talk about betting, if you were to structure, say you're buying into a particular platform like a Hotstar, you have subscription services. As part of that, you have access to their services. One of these services is a game which stimulates a betting activity. As long as you can demonstrate that the buy-in to Geo had nothing to do with participating in the betting game, I could still argue that principally it's an online social game until you put a notification saying even this type of social game may need a determination order. So you have to move away now from immediately reacting to what betting is, what rummy is, and all of that exists in the physical world. In the online world, you break that up and you simply see what is buy in and buy out, and that's the principle really that's come out now.
Okay, got it. Well, not completely got it. Somewhat. So the fun
Yeah,
section is over.
now it's the
We're
legal
now-
parlance.
Now we'll go to the structured part of it.
Yeah.
And that is something we saw a bit of. I had thought that all four of you would give different answers to most of these, because even in press conferences, when we've asked ministry folks that, hey, what is this? What is this? They have looked at us with certain eyes, a certain look that, is it OMG? Is it OSG? And the answer has always been quite diplomatic, that we'll have to take a call. We'll have to take a call. And that's what we've been hearing for the last, I don't know now, 8 months. But as we saw, as Sarthak said at one point, that certain games may not be classified at all under the OMG, OSG esports category. What happens to that? What happens to that? Pooja, if I can come to you for that.
So I still feel fairly that if it is not falling in these three buckets, or an online game, forget money, social, or it's not classified as a game or an online game, then clearly this is not the regulation for it. You have to then review it from a different lens, depending on what those terms are, what the game is, if it is not a traditional online game.
Yeah, so one of the things that Sarthak said when we were discussing this would be that online games have certain expectation of interplay. But I'm going through the definition of online game in the Act, which says any game which is played on an electronic device or a digital device and is managed and operated as a software through the internet or any other kind of technology facilitating electronic communication. So is communication part obligatory? Like if I'm playing Spiritfarer on my Nintendo Switch and delivering these little souls to the netherworld, fulfilling their last wishes, I'm not interacting with another human. Is that still an online?
Interacting with software, right?
Yeah.
They're still interacting in a certain way. No one is saying two individuals interacting or it's a multiplayer. The multiplayer aspect comes when it comes to esports specifically. So there is still an interaction, there is still a form of communication.
So when I'm spinning that little wheel during Amazon Prime Day sale, or I'm scratching that coupon because it's fun to do that, why is it not considered an online game?
So I would still see, I think what he was trying to say is it's not always not a game. It depends, right? When you're scratching the coupon, maybe it is more of not a game. It is a activity that you may be doing, which is not amounting to game. But when you're spinning the wheel, at least I may disagree over here and I say that it is a form of an online game. And specifically in the example you did give. So it is, I'm stopping, I'm pausing, I'm in a sense interacting, which is impacting what I will get at the end of it versus just scratching with something that's predetermined at the back end.
Okay, got it. Sarthak, before I come to you, Pooja and Rachana, if you want to address this part, so if you are an online game, would you necessarily have to be categorized? Can you have an existence where you are an online game, but you're not an OMG, OSG, or eSport?
Yes, of course. I mean, I'll jump in here. I think the easiest is, look, the classification only becomes relevant for the purposes of legitimacy. And today there is no concept, as the statute has brought in, that you have to go and market yourself in either bucket. What you have to do as a game provider is ensure that if you are a game, and those are, basic tenets of what a game is, you fulfill that. You need to make sure you qualify under the online social bucket category. Once you've done that, it's left honestly to the government to decide whether they need you to get a determination order, whether you need to go get registration. And of course, now if you're a competitive sport, then it becomes a little bit nuanced, and then you go into the esport category. So coming back to what you said, where you are a game, as a game service provider, you have two tests. One is the socialness of that game, this is how the Act sees it. And of course, if it makes strategic sense for you to make your game look closer to an esport. And that's all you do. Beyond that, as long as it's a game, you exist until the government says you don't exist.
I think from what Rachana is saying and where I'm picking, if it's online, I still feel it falls within one of the three buckets. It could be a game which is either a social game, an esport, or an OMG. I don't think that if it's an online game, it falls outside of these three categories specifically, unless any of you guys have an example of.
That's an interesting point. Sarthak, I want to come to you because you had a different opinion on the spin the wheel and the coupon thing. If you want to respond to Rachana and Pooja, who have taken somewhat diverse views on whether it's an exhaustive little circle of online game and these three categories, or if it's non-exhaustive.
See, I think as far as the definitions are concerned, I think there is three categories which are very specifically defined, which is esports, social games, and online money games. But there is, of course, a possibility that there could be a game which is neither of the three. Because the definitions are, I think the simplest definition is the OMG definition in the law. The esports one and the social game is very vague. So because there are so many conditionalities attached to what is a social game, esport, and OMG, any game not having one of the characteristics across the board could be that fourth category, which is just an online game.
Can you give an example just for ease of imagination? Anybody else who has an example of such a game?
See, I think again contextual, right? One of the key criteria for online social game is that it is for recreational, entertainment, and skill development purpose. Now, of course, these terms are vague, but if something is neither of these three categories and is operating as a game, you cannot fit it into online social game. You cannot fit it into esports, and of course, there is no money element, so there is no AMG reference as well. So this is a kind of game which may not be, an online social game to begin with.
That's not an example.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know if there's a game out there which is not neither entertainment, neither recreational, or for skill development purpose. These are vague terms, right?
I think so. That's why, I think it's hard for us because I think generationally, we've looked at games. I think, Aditi, we were talking about that, right? That games is so wide. And sometimes when you're thinking about board games, video games, hopscotch, all of these are some version of games. I'd argue that the quintessential, tying piece of any game is recreation. Now, and that's why I think I would differ slightly from Sarthak to say that if you are a game, you're likely therefore to come under the social bucket. And I think possibly alluding to why even the government didn't really go down the route of requiring the service provider to go register, because then everybody would go and register and there would be a slew of registration. So if I could argue oddly for the government and say, look, the logic for me to ask you to register is because I don't have time to go through maybe 2,000 applications, because every game in some form would want to fall under the social bucket. I've taken the argument to say, look, as long as you're not touching funds, which is what I care about, you go and exist. Whether you call yourself a game, whether you call yourself a social game is moot. I will only come in when money is involved. I think that's the theme of these rules.
We'll come back to the question of registration in a bit. Dhruv, I know you want to say something.
No,
if you can, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead with your question. Yeah.
No. When you're making your comment, if you can also then address the question like about what happens to creation of new game formats now, because for instance, when we have to imagine, we saw this happen right now amongst the five of us, when we had to imagine of a game format existing outside of this, Pooja took the safe stance, I would argue, saying that any game must be either OMG, OSG, or esport. But like Sarthak and Rachana argued that it could exist outside of these three categories, but the two of them were hard pressed to come up with an example. Do you think it stifles imagination in a civilian world and innovation in the business legal world?
Look, I'll tell you the lens with which a lot of people are actually approaching this is that as long as we don't fall under the online money gaming and esports category, we're fine, right? We're an online social game. You don't want to classify yourself as an online social game. You want to put yourself in this fourth bucket of, something that doesn't fall in any of these categories. It becomes inconsequential legally. The problem comes when today as lawyers, of course, it's very easy to say that, look, if there's no wagering happening, you're not squarely falling within the definition of esports. So therefore, you're an online social game, and it's fairly simple. There's no money involved. No one's going to look. You're fine. It's business as usual. But the approach of the ecosystem at large is that the minute money comes into the picture in any form, whether it's money in, money out, the ecosystem's taking a very conservative approach, which is that, oh wait, like, so you're taking money to skip ads, for example, or you're taking money to like buy certain features or tools in a game, and because there is money involved, so suddenly there is a concern whether this is an online money game or not. And that assessment for even online social games is becoming tricky, because the sentiment that at least I'm seeing, and I'm happy to hear thoughts of the other panelists as well, is that a lot of them today feel that they may actually need to go for determination just so that they can keep their larger ecosystem on who they're dependent to effectively support them, and for them to stay happy, and ensure that these guys are not falling within the definition of online money game. And I think that's really what's going to boil down to in practice, right?
Got it. Pooja, if you want to come in here about what Dhruv talked about the impact on other stakeholders, there are only 3 offenses defined under the Act, and they carry criminal imprisonment. Does it then lend credence to what Dhruv just said, that this creates an ecosystem where you need to prove you're not an OMG and therefore go for determination and possibly a registration and certificate of registration?
I think it goes back to the question, right? Not everyone to prove it can go down that road. Your criteria for determination, your criteria for registration are very limited. It's either when it comes to determination, you suo moto decide, the authority suo moto decides that. Number 2 is when it comes to your esport. And number 3 is if you are a category which has been identified by the central government, depending on where the funds are coming from, or basically what is the financial thresholds, etc. So when you look at it from that perspective, you can't suo moto go and say, you know what, I have identified myself as an online social game, and hence I am fairly safe, or I'm an esport and I'm fairly safe. The point is steering away from the concept of staking, betting, wagering, which has always been the case. Now, the only thing that has been taken away is your skill versus chance element of it, which was, tilting the favor in case of poker and other games which are more skill-based games. That is one element that has been taken away. So if you're not falling in the criteria where there is money in with an expectation of getting money or equivalent out, in those cases, you are falling squarely under other buckets, or it could be a third bucket of online game in general, the way other panelists consider them. But keeping that in mind, you are then not going down the registration. You don't have that option unless the government requires, the central government asks for it, or there's an authority which takes suo moto action.
So you're saying that voluntary registration is just not on the table. So for instance, it's not.
There in the rules before as an option, right? It was something that was considered in the draft rules, but in the final rules, you don't see place for voluntary registration at all. It is only specific conditions under which, or when the government requires it. Now, what those thresholds are, when they will, the central government make these notifications available, probably in time, you'll get more clarity. We've waited couple of months, a few more maybe will give us that kind of clarity. But till then, I think there is no option for you to go and voluntarily register or get yourself determined.
You want to respond to that?
Yeah, no, Aditi. So this is actually in lines with, if you recall our conversation earlier as well, right? Because Section 8.3 of the Act, when it actually came out, said that, essentially gave any applicant the power to go to the authority for determination. And when the rules came out, the rules actually only mentioned very specific categories. And that's where sort of the challenge comes, because today, if a player in the larger ecosystem says that, look, this is concerning, and we've seen instances already, right, where Apple has taken down apps, the Play Store has taken down apps. There are banks that are not necessarily supporting games that don't fall in the online money game category. At that point of time, for you to then have a recourse to effectively say that, look, I want to get a determination done because it's coming in the way of me doing business. That ability, I mean, when you read the Act, it gives you a sense that you have that right. You come to the rules and Pooja is right that that right is not there, expressly or impliedly.
Right. Rachana, if I can bring you in here, you spoke about how this has been done intentionally by the government because the government doesn't want to become a gatekeeper for essentially every game under the sun. But as Dhruv pointed out, there seems to be some contradiction, not contradiction, but some unease between the act and the rules. Like Section 8.3, as he cited. I believe it's Section 8.2, but I could be wrong. I'm not a lawyer. So there, what was the intention? Like, I always find it very hard to divine the intention at times.
No, so I think, I mean, shooting in the dark here, but I think I would disagree. I think under 8.2, there were powers bestowed on the central government, which allowed the central government to set up rules for recognizing certain categories of online games and registering them, giving it the power to determine and doing such other functions as it may deem to do so. So I think the rules are very much in line with what the Act was doing. I think the question about, what could be the other argument is this, that if you had to flip the script and you had to say, look, everybody can go, anybody and everybody that falls within the bucket of an online social game can go and register. We just discussed several examples from even the example list that you gave. Majority would fall under social games the moment you've solved for the pay in and payout tie-in, right? So with money gaming, the tie-in is that I've paid in money. The most simplistic explanation is I've paid in money with the intent of gaining money. In the process, I may have lost money. That's the easiest OMG test. Once you do away with that, you would easily fall under the social game category, which means you will now run to get registration or run to get a determination order. Now imagine for the authority, it has a slew of say 1,000 applications. It's not practical to then go and vet and give these orders. And then if the government were to say, okay, let me give a particular type of order, and then every other game falling in that type of order will be okay, then it loses oversight over, the nuances of a game that can be built upon a particular determination order. So today in the rules, it also says that just because one game has got a positive determination order doesn't mean it would equally apply to another game. I'm saying that these could, if I had to argue for the government, these were the arguments that I would make, that it's not feasible from a process perspective with what they are trying to achieve. Now, I think the related point is, of course, now that you have, and like Dhruv said, you have these gray areas that exist. And I think somebody's put it on the chat as well, like crossword, chess, they become, interesting examples because if you were to be an e-sport, you have to go down the NSG route. The NSG route is equally not clear because you have to have federation set up, and then there's a process. Which sporting federation do you come through? Chess, for instance, can you argue you could push yourself through, say, Olympics, something of that nature, and push your game through there? Crossword, what would you do? Quizzing, right? Kaun Banega Crorepati 2.0, if you had to revive, you try and push that obviously into the social bucket and move on. But there are some nuances of certain games that I think the dance is then, should you even want to be an e-sport right now because of the complications in registration? Or do you just live with the online social game category until further notice?
Got it. Sarthak, do you want to come in? And if you can also, how are the game developers supposed to make money? Ponder upon the question.
Yeah. So I think I'll first address the registration part very briefly. See, I think this is one of the good things they've done by not making it mandatory, by not making it voluntary as a registration. Because what we've seen, right, that while someone may want to take that registration, then, and there is not voluntary, so the service providers start relying on that registration to be a requirement to provide services. For example, like we've seen in the RMG world where app stores required a legal opinion on record from a panel of lawyers or law firms, only then they used to host a service, or a bank escrow would only provide you service where you have an opinion on record from certain empaneled lawyers that they have in the roster. So with the registration, what could have happened if they had continued with it for a voluntary one, that app stores, payment aggregators would have started to insist contractually that, hey, without registration, I'm not going to give you service. So while the registration would have been voluntary under law, in practice, people would have had to take it to, get the services from the people that, that are providing banking or advertising or marketing services. So I think that's one of the good things the rules have done, that it's not voluntary. Only a notified category gets a registration requirement, and everyone else otherwise don't really need a registration.
Sorry, Sarthak, I want to interrupt you here and bring up the point that Dhruv had raised earlier, that even though the voluntary registration bit has been done away with in the rules, as Pooja and Rachana also said, but the ecosystem has become so conservative that they're like, hey, you are dealing with money. We don't care whether it's wagering, other stakes, etc. You show us the COR, the certificate of registration. So what do you do in that scenario?
So now I can, in the current version, I as a game provider can point it out that, hey, there is no ability for me to take a registration because there is no notified category of games that the government has said. Because now there is no voluntary requirement, right? I don't have
what does an app store do? Just one sec, Pooja. What does the app store do in that case? Because if the app store says, hey, I am going to be the arbiter of what's legal or not legal, then IT ministry will be like, hey, whatever happened to your safe harbor due diligence thing, section 79, 79, 79, what's going to happen in that scenario? Because that's their favorite tool, right?
So see, one option was registration, that, hey, show me the registration from the OGI. Now I can, as a developer, say, hey, there's no means for me to take one. Now they can have their own contractual requirements like they did before, like I said, right? That they say, give me an opinion on record from a lawyer saying that these are the things, this is your game mechanics, this is where money is coming in. How is that not an OMG? So give me an opinion on record so that at least the service provider, which in this case is the App Store, has done its own internal due diligence to satisfy that it is not an OMG. Plus, I think one thing we need to keep in mind when we deal with gaming laws and any criminal laws, that bona fide intention is a little bit key. You have to kind of explain your intent or a malified intent to really come or crystallize the offense. And the opinion for the App Store would be that bona fide intention, as well as for the game developer, that, hey, I have an opinion on record saying I'm not an OMG, so I'm not doing something illegal. And that's why you can host me now. There's no problem to it.
So can the app store, or say the payment gateway like a Razorpay or a bank like HDFC, be in that position to divine intention that, hey, you had good intentions? Can they do that? I mean, you and Dhruv both talked about that, how for RMG's earlier app stores were doing it. You talked about how there was, you said, certified list of lawyers they could go to.
No, see, it's not about that. It's about them saying that, hey, give me an opinion from a reputed legal professional of the subject who says that your game is not an online money game or something that requires a registration. Because a game developer.
If I am someone like Parimatch, etc., I'd be like, okay, here is maybe not Sarthak, but maybe, I don't know, document 11, because that's the document I'm working on. Document 11, you are a lawyer. Here's a briefcase full of money. You say that I am not an OMG. I will then go to Google and Apple. Apple will be like, yes, document 11, the great lawyer has said it's not an OMG. And then the ministry, who will the ministry and the government go after? And in this case, the game is actually a clear-cut case of OMG.
And this has been happening, right? Like the entire ecosystem prior to this was, you have had legal opinions that have floated for, like games that are pure game of chances. And people have integrated payment gateways on the basis of those legal opinions. So I also feel, sorry, Sarthak, I didn't mean to cut you, but I just wanted to make this quick point, that the gaming industry has gone through this phase of, hey, let's rely upon legal opinions to justify what we are doing. And that's not necessarily worked out very well, simply because those legal opinions have been, sort of customized to what needs to be done at that point of time. But I do agree that, in terms of overburdening the authority, if you could voluntarily go to them, you would, there would be havoc. But if you look at what the original intent was, right, and I was reading 8.2, it said that the central government may vest the authority with the following powers, namely to determine on receipt of an application from any person offering an online game or on suo motu basis, right? So the original intent was that any person who's offering an online game can approach the authority. In the draft rules, they allowed you to approach the authority. In the final rules, they have now ensured that that right for social games is taken away. Then you come to rule 19 of the rules, which is basically talking about verification of determination order or certificate of registration prior to facilitation of financial transaction or authorization of funds, which is relevant for financial institutions. They read the whole thing, and this I'm telling you from practical experience. There is a word that's written over here called certificate of registration. That's all they read. They don't read everything around it. And now they're like, sorry, you'll need to get this certificate of registration. Have you figured out how you'll do it? And those conversations that end in a deadlock because they're like, look, there is financial and penal liability on us. We don't want to take the risk. And yes, point taken that at the end of the day, there is a higher burden of proof that you have to discharge. So, it's not that easy to prosecute somebody or to take press criminal charges against anybody. But the truth of the matter is nobody even wants to be in that position where that's a theoretical possibility as well, right? To say, hey, it's difficult. Look, it's a higher burden of proof. You'll not be able to discharge it. So don't worry. That's not really something that works very well with, these third-party platforms and banks, etc. So I do agree that, in the overall, in the grand scheme of things, the idea wouldn't have been to burden the authority, but I do hope that there is some practical solution that sort of finds its way and comes in the forefront for these online social games.
Okay. Sarthak, if you want to respond to that, and then Pooja.
Sorry, is there a specific question there? Or
You want
to
to finish your response, right? Because Dhruv had interjected. In case you don't want it, that's also fine.
I think we've covered it.
Okay, then Pooja.
No, I think fairly Dhruv brought up some of the points I was also trying to say that, and to ask your question, the briefcase of money, hey, this is what you will get if you give me an opinion in my favor, is a concern for financial institutions, which is why, going back to the point which Sarthak had mentioned, a lot of firms, companies like banks, financial institutions have a panel of preferred law firms or lawyers who they have worked with, who are trusted advisors to them, who generally would give opinions. And that's really where that conversation on panel of lawyers came from. That's why you don't go to any lawyer or any law firm in that kind of a situation. And there is a certain amount of expectation of quality when it comes to that. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is there is a concern which Dhruv has very rightly pointed out is, or Sarthak brought it up, I'm sorry, but everyone will constantly keep asking you for an opinion of a law firm if you have to do a financial transaction, especially when it comes to in-game purchases, because there could be instances when how the in-game purchase is viewed as how the gameplay is defined, how it's really designed in that way, will determine if it is actually sometimes gambling, or if I may use the word online money gaming, or just a pure social game. So there is going to be that layer of confusion, that layer of uncertainty when it comes to certain purchases specifically.
Sarthak, I think.
Yeah,
See,
that's
I
it.
think the point is not a law firm opinion or something. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the service providers need someone independent to say this game is okay. They are not going to evaluate games on a case-to-case basis. Now, that independent certification could come from the government, as that certification was envisaged before, or it could be like the law firm opinion I said, or it could be, as it used to exist very beautifully, the self-regulatory bodies certification, because there is some independent authority, right? I know it has its many.
Not going to work for gaming. The government has no trust in gaming players. It didn't work. It went to the court and said, hey, our intermediary rules as related to online gaming intermediaries are unenforceable. And I know this is an EGF webinar, but the government is like, nope, SRB is not happening for you guys.
See, ultimately, it's not about the body.
Load will be waiting for the couple of years again.
Yeah. See, I think, of course, it has had its flaw, but I think the ultimate point I'm driving, the two parties who are, meeting to do the business, one, the game developer, and the other, the service provider, they need to rely on an independent third party to do that. Now, who that independent third party is, whether it's the government, it's a law firm, it could be a body, someone has to figure that out. I think that's what one step the government tried to do with the voluntary registration. And now in this one, it's something which is not voluntary. It's something that they only ask for. So yeah, we have a little bit of a gap of what people really rely on to assure themselves whether the game is okay or not.
Got it. So we've gone a little bit over the impact on different stakeholders. We've gone over game developers. Some of the monetization strategies are still up in the air. We've gone over third parties like intermediaries, advertisers, and financial partners. Are there any other stakeholders that we're missing? Sarthak, I think you wanted to say something about that.
So see, of course, we have the developers and the people who fit into 5, 6, 7 traditionally. But I think there is a little bit of ambiguity about, see, I think what the Proga has done, there were a bunch of settled businesses that were existing. And the question was really about skill chance, money in, money out. But I think with Proga coming in, all the settled businesses are now, thinking, hey, am I legal? Am I not legal? Like where a Candy Crush or a service server were existing very peacefully, everyone has a doubt in their head now. So even things which do not require money but just have in-game currency items, etc., everyone has a question mark now.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, one of the intentions of the government was to ban offshore operators, which of course have gotten out of the way completely. One thing that has done well by Proga. But then you have a lot of software developers, people who operate GCCs in India, who may not even touch the Indian market or the Indian consumer, may just be developing software for overseas market, or just supporting technology or doing advertisement support or financial services support. I think where Proga again leaves it a little bit ambiguous is that what happens to those businesses, because ultimately it is an online money game that they're helping to be built and made and offered. It's just not offered to the Indian consumer. It's offered to someone in Cyprus or someone. So do you really catch them or not is a bigger question mark. And I think this is one of the top 3 questions that industry has gone back to the government with. What happens to their software support services to overseas market? What happens to their investments or companies that they had opened in, let's say, MENA region or the African region as an RMG? What happens to those investments even before Proga? And I think how can they really use the data that they have gathered over the years and use it to leverage and make some other products? So I think these are some ambiguities that Proga does has left out in the open, which were fairly, I think, clear before Proga.
Got it. We're going to switch gears a little bit, and sorry, Rachana, you have something to say. Sorry.
No, I think just on the last point, I differ there slightly because I think if you're providing services to an offshore entity offering games overseas, I don't think Proga is of immediate consequence to you because your India activities are just tech services. I think the flip is far more relevant, that if you're an overseas entity that has incidental viewership in India, then how you look at Proga. But if you're offering offshore services, I think it's out of the ambit of the act anyway. So I disagree there. I think the other peripheral players are, of course, anybody promoting, hosting, all of those guys. So influencers may care, ad providers may care, but offshore entities, if you're incidental to India, to the extent if it's just viewership, again, you could even test that saying viewership of your game overseas to Indians is just an advert space. To how much can Indian players or users participate, only then Proga comes in. So yeah, I think that's
that one. Sorry, I
Yeah.
think then you have to definitely get the buy-in of your AD bank
Sorry, Pooja, you're breaking a bit.
on that because
Sorry, Pooja, can you
immaterial
repeat your
of
sentence?
this are.
Can you repeat your sentence? You break.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sure. So I said it also depends on your comfort of your AD bank in this kind of situation, because if they are looking, when money is coming in for the services you are giving externally, it really depends on how they are going to view it and view this money, which is actually for a service or a software that you're providing for online money gaming. So there could be a certain amount of risk when it comes to that, or how the financial institutions will review that, because they also need to protect themselves. So there will be definitely some ambiguity there.
Got it. Dhruv, you want to respond? When you're responding to what Pooja, Rachana, Sarthak said about this, can you also, I want to switch gears a little bit. If you can also talk about the functioning and composition of the Online Gaming Authority. And
Yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
I would actually agree with Rachana on this, that in terms of how the act is structured, I don't think that piece is something that is of too much concern. In some of the conversations or deliberations that happened, this point was raised. I think by and large, the overall sentiment is that this shouldn't get covered under the law. There are gaming companies in India that have functional GCCs operating, and they will continue to, of course, run those. It shouldn't be a problem. And perhaps it's because of ambiguities and questions like this that the adjudicatory powers that this law has have stayed confined within MeTi. Because I think, I mean, while a lot of people have come and said that, they are judge, jury, executor as far as this law is concerned, the truth of the matter is that the sector went through a massive overhaul, right, overnight. And when you do that, it's very hard to come up with a legislation that can actually cater to every scenario. And when you are sort of in that transition, I think in some sense, the fact that the regulators are also the adjudicators will come in handy for the gaming ecosystem at large, because queries like this and issues like this, and even the social game aspects that we were talking about, where like the rule doesn't allow for determination, but if it's an issue that comes up before MeTi, for me to then issue an advisory and give some clarification that can then be used for or the online gaming authority to give some clarification, can then be used for the other players in the ecosystem to give them comfort that this is actually an online social game. So I do think that largely the fact that all of the adjudicatory functions are within MeTi is also a very good and positive thing.
So you don't think about it being headed by an additional secretary from MeTi, and then the final authority being the MeTi secretary? That's not a problem.
I don't think in the short term that's a problem. So I do think, again, like I said, the fact that this sector has been completely overhauled, I do think, and I know it's a strange concept even for lawyers, right, to say that an adjudicatory function is with the legislature. But given how the sector has just transitioned, I would by and large say that it's a good thing. And I think a lot of the doubts and questions and clarifications that need to come out around business models, around what is permissible, what is not permissible, which category will a game fall in, the way we started this webinar, I think all those clarifications can come out from MeTi a lot easier and in a lot more structured manner if they are the ones also hearing grievances and passing orders.
You kind of hedged your bets there by saying it's not a problem in the short term.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I do think but in the long term, would I prefer that there is a court that has powers, and there are judicial people sitting behind the bench who have the the judicial skill set to be able to pass orders which result in imprisonment or financial penalties, of course, right? But I'm just saying that today, had that been the case, I feel our sector would have been in a little bit more of a or rather in a greater sort of gray zone to then be able to navigate, because there'd be an independent judicial body that would be interpreting the law, as opposed to the folks that have come up with a law, done consultations with you to then try and and given you comfort in a lot of these consultations that, guys, don't worry, we also want to make sure that there is going to be enough guidance from us going forward if at all you think that you are in the gray, but as long as you're not falling in the online money gaming category.
Got it. Rachana, you wanted to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I think the concept is not new. You have to remember there's also something as the Competition Commission. Competition Commission has Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Arguably, business lines could also fall within competition lines. So I think it's less about separation of powers, but I think on a lighter note, you just hope that the additional secretary and secretary are friends. And so you don't see different forms of decision making. So I think it's more people driven rather than ministry, but that's just on a lighter note. I think I align with Dhruv on that one.
Got it. We are at 4:54. We have gone 4 minutes past our discussion time. I want to come to the audience questions now. Sorry for the weird segue. Yeah. So first question is from Nikunj, and other audience members. If you want to keep posting your questions, please do that in the chat and we'll go through them. Nikunj asked about how would, say, crossword in an e-paper. I'll just add to it. How will New York Times games be classified? And then he also goes on to ask, what will how will games that are incidental to the service provider's functions be classified, like the dinosaur game on Google Chrome? Quick responses to this one, classification responses.
So for me, at least, some of them would fall, like your crossword, etc., could fall in your social game. Your dinosaur game would, sorry, I'll let someone else give, but I think I still feel it falls in the social game category because it fulfills the criteria that are there.
I mean, I personally think the dinosaur game could be argued to not be an online game because it works when your internet fails. So it's not online. There's no internet communication.
And someone will be there to say it is recreational. I bet you.
Recreational, yeah. Dinosaurs jumping on cacti works. Okay. Next question is, Pranjay Mishra has asked if offshore gaming platforms like OneXBet, which deal with betting and the like, can still be accessed digitally despite regulation. Does the real challenge lie more in lawmaking or in digital enforcement? Hey, dude, don't make an argument for banning VPNs. That's what the government wants to do. But I'll let the lawyers answer.
I mean, I think it's more, I think now enforcement is purely, like you said, through your payment channels. Questions like this, it's coming back to what Dhruv was saying. And obviously, I heard that lawyers here have gotten bags of money for legal opinion. So I'll take that offline. What are these bags of money? But coming back, I think that's exactly this, right? That because of the issue about, you have these laws in place, but how do you check enforcement? It comes back to what everybody was saying, that what kind of due diligence will be picked up. And now, because in some sense, financial institutions are gatekeepers, these are questions that they will test. And if they believe that it's not a safe bet, then it's not, you're going to see enforcement by freezing of business. That's how I see enforcement coming in. And of course, look, if VPN blocks come in, then that's an easier answer.
Don't say things like that, Rachana. But a related question to that about how enforcement will happen through financial institutions. Ananay Jain has asked, how are websites like Barimatch, OneXBet still operating with all transactions happening, whereas Game of Skill is completely banned?
I think it's a question of the comfort of the players on the ecosystem. I'm not aware of course, how these particular platforms are working, but I can tell you as an industry, the larger RMG players, which were obviously tied to, there's a certain amount of wager, they moved away from their traditional operations and diversified. So if you're saying that there are still entities like a 1xBet that are operating on similar models and they didn't stop their operations, I think that's just a feature of their risk appetite and not so much anything else.
The question is slightly different. For instance, we saw this with the Mahadev betting app as well. That, of course, you had the problem of mirror sites coming up, even though Section 69A orders had been issued on the recommendation of ED and whatnot.
Yeah.
The transactions on UPI, for instance, through all these Telegram channels or WhatsApp channels that were created, were still going through.
Yeah.
So how are those UPI accounts still functioning? And if you're doing a whack-a-mole approach with UPI accounts or bank accounts as well, where is the KYC system failing then? Would be an answer to it.
No, 100%. I think this concept of payment players being gatekeepers, I would imagine, has come through because of this. So now because remember, any payment players hit by another regulator called RBI, who's also watching, who's also auditing, who's also taking note of what kind of transactions they're processing. So it's now a ministry and regulator coordinated approach. So till now, maybe these payment players were having a higher risk appetite and they moved on. I would see that being the most obvious and immediate change coming through. So, it's a question of now, are banks rejigging or are they okay and they're okay to move on with that process?
Got it. Saurav Kumar asks, for foreign headquartered online game service providers, does country of origin apply to the parent entity or the Indian subsidiary? Many global platforms operate through Indian subsidiaries. It is unclear whether the regulatory risk attaches to the group's global headquarters or the entity directly contracting with the Indian users.
So this would be both from, especially if there is a entity contracting with Indian users, that would be the first one. But if they don't have an Indian headquarter, this law definitely has extraterritorial jurisdiction. So it takes care of that element of it as well. So if you don't have presence in India, then your headquarters outside of India would also you have the right to go against them.
And I think it's a tricky point, right? Because country of origin is a testing piece while you're doing registration. So I think naturally the direct answer is, of course, they look at the company applying and they look at their shareholders and they'll move on. But a deep dive test, which we don't know if they'll do, like from a beneficial ownership test, are they going to trail back again, similar to how you see in FEMA? Are you going to look at for specific types of countries that they may not want investments, etc. through? So I think the immediate obvious piece is obviously to the company that's applying. And of course, like Pooja said, if they have Indian headquarters, great. But even if they have Indian headquarters and they have overseas jurisdiction, because it's language such as country of origin, I think the point to be tested is how far are they going to go to test that piece.
So I think to extend
Sorry.
the argument of country of origin less from an enforcement perspective, I think this is also a way of the government to keep apps which are from other territories, depending on how they control the data on your phone, the data you're sharing with them, etc. So I think the country of origin test is also keeping in mind those elements, which I think Rachana had alluded to when it comes to FDI, etc.
Okay. Saurav has two additional questions. The first one is, how frequently must the online gaming service providers notify the gaming authority of changes to in-game payment features, and what counts as a notifiable change? Are there any considerable thresholds? Would bug fixes, UI redesigns, new monetization SKUs, limited time events also fall within the scope?
I think it does when it materially changes the game format that's been vetted by the government. So you can't look at it in isolation. If you were to merely say that UI UX has been changed, so the look and feel has changed, but fundamentally what's been given by the regulators, clean and approved, I don't think that's the piece that they're going to. What they're going to do is now, because we don't have the thresholds of what they're looking at when they're doing this determination order, I think it's a jurisprudence that also has to evolve. But immediately, if your game has been determined to be, or say there's a green light and you can, go on being an online social game despite, say meeting a certain payment threshold, the government green lighting that payment threshold. Now you additionally pile on and say have additional payment flows. In that scenario, maybe you would have to go, but ordinarily, if payment thresholds was not a piece, if you were just falling under the 8.1 bucket, right, where the government merely notified some game to be determined, then what else has changed from what you gave? So it's more a substantial test rather than a one-off piece test that you see.
In fact, the draft rules actually had a definition of material change, if you remember, right? So, and that created more confusion in the market in terms of, look, will minor changes in our game flow also then qualify, and then we have to go back to the authority. So they've removed that reference, which I think is by and large a good thing. And to effectively be able to address this problem, we will go back to our old school method, legal opinions.
Lawyers will make big bucks here. I mean, everything is a legal opinion. Matey, I think, has fallen in love with law firms and lawyers, always giving them more work. But moving on, what do you sort of last question? What due diligence framework should payment intermediaries adopt to avoid criminal liability under Section 7 of PROGA until the Gaming Authority publishes a blacklist of OMGs? What steps will constitute sufficient due diligence? Undergoing KYB, I'm assuming that's KYC checks, self-certification, contract, warranty is sufficient. Anybody who wants to take that?
See, I think like we were alluding to, right? Ultimately, this is what we were talking about. Someone needs an independent person to say that, hey, this is okay, or do it on by themselves. So people usually let's say maybe going forward, app store providers or search engine teams who are in charge of onboarding it would run it by their legal in-house team to see what the mechanics of the game is, what is it really doing, and how is the provider earning revenue out of it. I think they may want to do their own due diligence, of course, have contractual safeguards being put, whether it is indemnity or whether it is in the form of reps and warranties, or again, telling the provider as well if there are material changes to the app ecosystem itself. So I think those contractual safeguards will have to be built, but I think because there is direct liability on the financial service providers as well, they will have to get into the thick of the structure and model in which the game is being provided and be comfortable with it before they are, letting it host or service them through financial institutions.
Rachana, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I think on the question of, until there's some clarity on this, how does due diligence look? I think now it's a related piece for any player contracting with a digital, platform that, while we're obviously, this is a platform where we're discussing Proga rules, I think you have to take a broad-based approach now with any digital player. So you look at how your compliance is under intermediaries, you look at how, what and where an online game is, you look at payment flows, you do a technical audit and you see how that plays in. And that's the kind of, I guess, wariness you would have to have. So now, you always looked at diligence as a precursor to an investment. What the government has now done with these slew of legislations is that diligence is also a precursor to operational partnerships. So that's the new, I would say that's the new wave. In terms of what can you do as a player, because you don't have the rule book yet, I think the obvious point is, like Sarthak said, is you map against what the regulations say today and you take a standard of risk that you're okay to go by. That's the play for the next year, I would imagine.
Got it.
Yeah. What I hope doesn't happen though is that financial institutions take a different view in terms of where your game falls. Where you're like, hey, this is a social game, please, help us. And their legal team and their compliance team looks at it and concludes that, hey, actually, we think this is an esport. Because again, like the definitions, could potentially, be interpreted differently. And then you're in a bit of a fix because now suddenly you have to go for determination, registration, etc., etc. So, I mean, those are the places, I would hope that there is some level of clarity that comes in the near future.
Okay. Shubhankit Gupta asked, where would a game fall where the company is not charging any fees for joining the game, but they offer gifts upon winning the game? That is something, now this is me saying, that is something a lot of RNG players did, where they pivoted to no entry fee, but yes, output fee, like winning. And the ministry, from what I understand, has taken a fairly conservative view that even if it's free to play, but you're winning, arguably it will be an OMG. So responses to that.
So I think just to take a shot at it, I think there is a little bit of an ambiguity here on why this hysteria has been created because of these statements that, a free-to-play offering with rewards is a little bit of problematic. But again, as lawyers, if we read the law, see the definition of an OMG, it is really not a OMG if you construct it that way. Because I think, like we all agree, money in and money out is the key criteria for an online money game. And when you're not taking anything from the user, then you don't really meet that criteria. So I think the confusion really is not from the law, but because of all the reportage and the hearsay conversations everyone has access to, which kind of say that, okay, while the law may not be saying it, there is still some hesitation. Now, where's that hesitation coming from? If not from the law, is anybody's guess.
Sarthak, that was a completely ouch moment. Rachana, I am, until and unless you are opposing Sarthak, I'm going to skip because we have.
I am. I actually, I 100%
debate to go. Please go.
No, I am, because I think the context for, even if it's not pay in and pay out, if the only way to access that winnings is to pay a consideration to access, it goes back to the spirit of, is the intent of the payout tied to a pay in? And I think when you were talking about the references of the conversation, the context of that conversation to my mind was this, that they weren't talking so much about a fee, to saying that, hey, it's free to play and then you can get winnings only after you pay a certain piece. If there is some expectation of funds going back to winnings, that's where the contest sort of comes in. So I don't think it's a straitjacket if there isn't any pay in and then subsequently you have to do some payment. It's automatically out of the bucket. The trick is in so much of the structuring of when that.
The context you said, Aditi, was there is no payment from the user regardless, right?
There's no payment.
Yeah. So I would say if there's no payment, whether at the participation or at the end, nowhere at all, then I think I find it hard to, categorize something like that under OMG.
Honestly, that goes back to your spin the wheel example, right?
Yes, spin the wheel. I'm glad you mentioned spin the wheel, but I'm also thinking the Amazon model of operations, offer everything at deep discounts, kill the market, eviscerate it, and then raise prices. So that, I believe, you're the lawyers. I believe that has been a competition concern. So I'm wondering if that analogy, of course, not a complete match, does that work here? You lure people in with free to play, and then they're so ensconced in the system, they're addicted to it that they're like, oops. So I just,
I don't think the Amazon example ties in here. And I also don't think spin the wheel ties in here. I think the cool one is really to say you are playing a game, you keep playing, you reach a threshold where you've gotten sticky. And this happens to me a fair bit with mobile games where you reach level 1000, it's all free. Now to be able to access the points and to transfer into a higher level or to do something better with that, and I'm not the game designer, but in a very simplistic term, that is tied to some amount of payment, then this classification changes. I think with what Sarthak and Pooja are saying, that if the entire ecosystem doesn't involve payment, then I don't think that's what the government was talking about, because then it's a little strange. Then if there's no money in the conversation and there's nothing tied into your payout, then, I mean, the question is moot. I think where they were going, yeah.
the risk of losing
Yeah.
money, then how does it matter?
Yeah.
Okay, got
Yeah.
it. Anane Jain pointed out that, just to add, Dream 11 is still functioning on free-to-play model where you join for free and win contests. Just a reminder to the audience, we have 4 more minutes for the Q&A here. So quickly post your questions. Request to the panelists, keep your answers short now. We have this question from Prakhar Rai. Would game shows streamed online fall within the definition of an online game? Online game, not OMG, OSG, esports. If they incorporate interactive elements for viewers, including the distribution of vouchers, coupons, or similar rewards.
It is online game, yeah. I think,
It
and I think you'll have to see it with who's playing with it, right? I think if you're talking about the audience, for that context, is that an online money game, social game, you can go down that route depending on what that interaction looks like. But yeah, overall, it could be an online.
Okay. Anybody else who wants to pipe in? Cool. Last question that I can see is from Srishti Rathore. To mitigate potential risk exposure under Section 6, which is about the ban on advertisements and promotion of OMGs, what factors should be evaluated prior to endorsing an online game under the current legal framework? Further, would such an assessment lend itself to a binary yes or no due diligence outcome, or would it be a high risk to low risk analysis?
I think it's the latter, which is high risk to low risk. I don't think anybody like Dhruv, and generally the conversation has been going, there are ambiguities that could come about. So I would imagine people would do a high risk to low risk unless it's an obvious yes or no answer. In terms of diligence, I'd say, again, it ties back to what any player now engaging with an online game would do, which would, test first principles, really. Of course, differ to everybody else on this as well.
Yeah. And I would say that, look, that test has been in existence for a while, right? I mean, so far, what were advertisers doing? They were evaluating it on skill versus chance. That's far more complex, right? To be able to come to a conclusion in terms of what it is. Here, at least, what you're saying is, look, it's not online money game, right? That's what you may want to make sure it doesn't fall, the ad or whatever doesn't fall in that category, which I think is a far lesser threshold to meet for advertisers at this point of time. So, but yeah, I mean, I think the bar will have to be on a high risk, low risk, and take that call if there is any ambiguity for them.
That, coupled with adequate protections under a contract, should be good enough from an endorser perspective.
Yeah, and legal opinion, guys, don't forget that.
Bags of money, apparently. Bags of money.
It's like I am not.
I'm only joking. I need to clarify this. Okay, it's a joke. Please don't take this seriously. But come on,
Dhruv is making
one way
money.
to back your high risk or low risk threshold
This
is
is
to
being
say
transcribed by AI. AI doesn't understand nuance, sarcasm. So you are being transcribed as lawyers who are looking for bags of money.
I
yeah,
love
it's a
that.
listen.
Yeah, no.
Okay. But jokes apart, any other questions from the audience? I'm also curious on an advertising perspective. Like, if I'm a celebrity and I just want money, but I get into trouble with the authority for endorsing an OMG, can I claim deepfake? Because I can very well imagine certain people going down that road.
Not really,
Uh,
because
Move it.
go ahead, go
I
ahead.
thought it would be email trail or
National
something.
Identity Defense.
Sorry, one by one, one by one.
No, I would
Uh,
imagine, like, I'm assuming you're joking, because I think otherwise there would be communication trail, agreement or some form of, interchange between the advertisement creator and the celebrity, which you could pin it down to. But
mhm.
yeah, I think, see, as in CPA, it always existed that a celebrity needs to do its own due diligence, even, before Proga. I'm sure under Proga that would amplify. But that due diligence always existed even for celebrities before Proga.
Okay. Anybody else?
The manager
Okay.
will be hauled up. Beyond.
I don't have a manager. I mean, I'm assuming I'm a tiny celebrity here, not very ambitious.
But if you,
But
but well, I think if it's not the celebrity and you're claiming deepfake, it will go against the company. The company will then put across, hey, this is the document, this is the mail trail. I don't think there is that option really.
what Sarthak said. Got it. Thank you, Pooja. Thank you, Rachana. Thank you, Sarthak. Thank you, Dhruv. With this, we end this panel discussion, and I hand it over back to Devhuti.
Thanks, everyone. Lovely speaking.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks everyone for this very insightful discussion. I thank everyone who have stayed on with us throughout the first session. Thank you for your active participation. Really appreciate it. I do hope that you found the first session useful and you got a lot of legal advice and opinion without paying any bags of money. That is free, absolutely free of cost. Without much further ado, if Gowree and Aditi are ready with the next session, then we can roll on to the session.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Devhuti. And the first session I was here, quite interesting conversations. So whatever remains, we can take it up, Aditi.
Thanks, Gowree. Thanks for being here. I'll try to make it as fun. We'll talk about bags of money if we get a chance. But the biggest question I always have, especially as a journalist, and I know this is not attributable, what has the government's response been pre and post the act and pre and post the notification of the rules? Like, where does the government stand in your interactions, in ancillary people's interactions?
A very tough question, though not legal. So thus far, we have, I'm talking about, when I'm comparing the conversation, that we used to have during the IT rules amendment, which had brought in the concept of permissible game and the like, etc. Right? If you recollect. So the kind of interactions we had those days, open houses, conversations, during the drafting phase. Unfortunately, we have now not seen that happen. As all of us know, the act came in suddenly, right? Thereafter, of course, the rules, luckily, at least there was some kind of, exchange in terms of taking our consultation, in terms of, what should be the, right approach forward for the rules. But even then, if you see, several things that were recommended are still, not finding place in the rules. And there were very sort of closed door interactions, unlike what we have seen in the past in terms of open interactions, right? So somewhere that, feedback from the industry, if I would say that, and, to the government, and understanding that feedback and then coming up with the laws, that kind of interaction has been missing. I hope when the authority gets set up, it has wider kind of outreach, sort of composition. So even if you see, I'm slightly digressing from your point, but which is relevant to the question that you asked. If you really see the rules, you have the act and then the rules. And within the rules, you have a lot of open-ended items which the authorities will direct, because under Section 8(3) of the Act, the authority can have the power to issue directions. So a lot of provisions that you will see whether it is Rule 6, 16 to 19, lot of thing is yet to be seen, right? So I really hope that during this phase, which is post-Proga and the rules, when the authority comes up with its own directions or otherwise, there is a scope for more interaction. And all of us, should strive to make the representation for that interaction, because whatever the first panel members explain, for example, how will the financial, sort of, intermediaries react? How will the, so there is good scope for the authority to give issue direction, guidance, right? So that opportunity can be used to get more clarity for the stakeholders. Otherwise, you will have, even if you really see the whole scope of the act, it is promotion of, casual social games or, esports. When you say promotion, that means it has to be an open sector, and everybody is free to sort of, come in without any hindrances. But as the first panel has indicated, there will be a lot of hindrances. So how can you really, create an ecosystem which gives better clarity through the authority? So that is where I feel that the, authority, I will not say MeitY or otherwise, because now it's a consolidated authority. How that authority interacts is going to be the key, because we have not seen that interaction, transparency insofar as the act and the rules are concerned. I know it's a longish answer, but I just wanted to cover the second part as well. Yeah.
I get it. It's interesting you focused a lot more on delegated legislation here. So, and I can't help but compare it to what's been proposed under IT rules, whose consultation ended yesterday, about binding force for advisories, SOPs, etc. And it's also interesting how the response has been very different, where here you are hoping that when there is...
That's the only hope left, I would say.
Okay. Interesting. So, because in IT rules, people are like, nope, no delegated legislation. Put it in the rules. Whereas here, the industry seems to be, as you said, the last hope seems to be hinging on delegated legislation. Got it. And this promotion part, the draft rules talked about giving those promotion powers and allowing MIB and Youth Affairs and Sports Ministry to frame the rules. But in the press conference, IT Secretary said that it was pretty obvious in the act. We thought it was unnecessary to include it in the rules again. So have you had any interactions with MIB and the Ministry of Yas, as I like to call it?
No, I mean, interaction, as I said, everybody, unlike before, is not very sure, what is their role and how it will play out in the future. See, insofar as MIB is concerned, I think their only role, in my view, in this, because if you see MIB Joint Secretary anyway sitting on the authority now, correct? The only role, if I would say, that could be on the content side. And you have already seen a BIS standard being issued, which I think, there was, consultation through MIB as well, right? The way we saw under OTT age rating, right? So they have recently come out with the standard. So maybe those are the things where MIB can play the role, because MIB, as per the allocation of business rules, doesn't have the power insofar as the gaming is concerned, right? They have the power on the content generally, right? So they would then look at more in the context of, violence, obscenity, in that context, age rating. I believe if they come out with something, right, a code to say, or, a guidance to say that, okay, I will make this BI standard mandatory, right? So I think that is where I feel MIB can play the role. Insofar as youth affairs, I mean, honestly, under the sports, I mean, the national act, what is considered as sport, etc. So maybe that is where they will play major role, right? So these are the two areas I believe. But otherwise, overall, for online game ecosystem, from a gaming perspective, it is going to be the authority.
So you spoke about the BIS features, and in the past, there has been a little bit of confusion between MeitY and MIB, especially when it came to rules around online gaming intermediaries, that whether they're intermediaries or publishers. Actually, MIB had taken the view in that interministerial task force that they are publishers, they are in charge of the content. And therefore, and it is only after intervention from PMO that it was decided that we make amendments to IT rules and put it under Part 2, make it supremely bloated and unenforceable.
Yeah.
So, and now you're talking about these BIS standards, which you said MIB convened. There's also an interesting thing that has been introduced to through the rules, the user safety features.
Yes.
So technical, procedural, operational, behavioral, or system-related safeguards. MeitY, MIB.
I think I don't believe now it is MeitY, MIB. It is going to be the authority ultimately, right? And it's a combination of both, correct? And because in user safety you also have some financial features, etc. So you also have somebody, coming from MHA and finance ministry, etc. Right? So now I'm not going to think which ministry, I'm going to think authority, if you ask me, going forward.
Okay.
Right? And I because you brought this, safety feature point, I mean, when I was listening to the first conversation that you had, online game, whether only 3 buckets and all that. I mean, I'm looking at it more broadly, whether, because there could be situation where some games say that, I'm not falling in social, neither esports. Does it mean they don't get regulated? Right? So you have to think the other way around, because if you see section 8.3 where the direction, the authority has wide powers and you can carries, it carries forward in the rules, the word used there is online game, period. Right? So I don't care whether you're social, whether you're esport or not or whatever, I will issue directions, because the overall construct, because you mentioned user safety, it, because from a designation and registration I can understand the bucketing, but if you have to from an ecosystem perspective, if you're an online game, I will look at user safety, I will look at generally KYC or whatever it may be, right? So that's a broader perspective to think about, even for that matter, whether age rating, age gating, right, all of that. I mean, conceptually, I get practically, I get what panel members said, that, there cannot be a situation where you can't fall under either of the 3 buckets. But should there be such a situation, you don't have a loophole out, because the authority has a wider power over on online anyway. That's the way I'm looking at it.
I get that. Just for ease of, as I said, imagination earlier, because we struggled with that in panel 1.
Yeah.
What kind of gameplay would be outside of OMG, OSG, esport?
See, I mean, one can keep arguing on that, for example, spin the wheel that you mentioned, right? What is recreation? What is, fun? I mean, one can argue that way, right? So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. So to keep that argument out, to say, hey, I'm not online social game and neither am I esport, I don't get regulated. I think you have to think from that perspective, that everybody, whoever is game, so long as your game, you're regulated. I think that's the way I would look at it. When I say regulated, possible to get regulated, like for example, right? So that is why the authority has been set up to see whichever game in India, I will look at it, whether it needs further regulation. If you don't need regulation, that's fine. But I have an oversight over you. That's the way I look at it.
So I'm trying to think as a government, and the reason cited by the government, both in parliament as well as in press conferences, and when I'd interviewed the IT secretary as well, was that the reason Proga was brought around in such a way was because this is an industry, particularly the real money gaming industry, now the OMG industry, that is flush with money.
Yeah.
And flush with lobbying money. Therefore, if you try to have consultations, etc., it's like splitting hair all the time. And I'm just wondering, if we go down that road of having a 4th category, which is not OMG, not OSG, not esports, do we run the risk of defeating the point of this act?
Not really. I'm not saying, okay, I'm putting it very simply, that I just want to point out that even if you have to look at the fact that authority has oversight on online game, period. That's the simplest way I'm looking at it, right? And if you are a social game, okay. If you are an esport, okay. But I will have oversight over all the online games, period. That's about it. Nothing, nothing less. So, I don't think we need to deliberate further. If there is a 4th category, then what? I'm just simply saying, if you're likely to fall within cracks, that is what is being bridged. That's all.
Got it. Now, when we come to OMG, OSG, esport, and let's ignore the imaginary 4th category for the time being, there's graded regulatory / compliance burden placed. OMG, illegal, gone. Esport, a higher degree of compliance required with mandatory recognition and mandatory registration. And OSG, up in air. Now, in that scenario, does it allow for slippages where I, as a game developer, might seek a certain kind of recognition, preferably as OSG, even when I might be esport, or even when I'm OMG, I might be willing to live with the tag of esport? Or is there enough room? Is there enough clarity in the act and rules to say, hey, you are not an esport. No, you're not OSG, you are OMG, you are gone.
See, I think esport, as you rightly said, has much higher threshold, and I'll explain why. In some cases, people will want to be esport. If you see the definition, coming back to the money in, money out, right? In case of esports, they have said that money in, money out to some extent is allowed. right? Whatever entry fee or whatever it is, right? Which is not permissible in a social game, correct? So if, I mean, of course, it can't be in the nature of stake and all those, sort of caveats apply, right? So you may want to be esport if you want to create tournaments of that nature, correct? Now, unfortunately, if you see the definition, it's going to be very hard to fall in the category of esports in the first place. So you could have a game which has the potential of becoming an esport, but you have to live with the fact that I will continue to be, a social game and not have this ability of, collecting entry fee and the like. Correct? Because you not only have to have recognition under that law, you have to be, I think Rachana mentioned, right? Federation, then plus you have to be recognized as a part of multi-sport event. There are multiple kind of thresholds that you need to meet. And as a side note, if the government really wanted to explore, sort of explore how India can flourish as a e-sport, sort of economy or whatever, gaming economy, I think this could have been, much lesser, restrictive in terms of e-sport category, because all the indigenous games, and this is a question yesterday in one of the sessions I was conducting closed door conversations, people were bringing this out that I'm an indigenous game, I'm developing something which has the potential of becoming an e-sport, but I will not have that wherewithal to register as e-sport unless I reach a particular federation level and the like, right? Because of without that, I will not get recognition under the act, the Sports Act, right? So that is where I think somewhere that tournament based ecosystem or a e-sport ecosystem that India wants to create, if at all, this is not going to sort of enhance that. So therefore, coming back to your question, I think many of the potential e-sport games may still have to live with being social games currently, right? And till they develop to that level. And then you don't have that ability of, taking the entry fee and rewards and the like.
Got it. Because of this reliance on federations for esport recognition,
Yeah,
I think it allows for a lot of gatekeeping.
that's exactly right. So therefore, that I really hope that they, they revisit over a period of time, this particular definition and give some relaxations, because the current one is very, very, multiple barriers to entry, honestly.
Because in the past, there have been reported instances where players, because they fell out with a certain esport federation, I don't remember the exact names of the federations involved, but if they fell out of favor with the individuals involved, they, despite being at the top of their field within the country, they could not compete in tournaments outside.
So that itself is a gatekeeping ecosystem, right? The federation ecosystem already. That's for the players. That's for the players.
Are there
Correct?
checks and balances of any kind, either within the act rules or with the sports ministry or under the national
We
sports?
need to now see how that act develops. That's an equally new act, right? Because
Yeah.
you know that even our football federation faced an issue with the IFA, right? So we need to, and because of that was one of the reasons, right? So we need to see how that ecosystem develops under the new act itself. We are yet to see, that happen, effectively. So, and we need to also see what are the game formats they agree to include. All that is yet to be seen.
Got it. And we've been talking about the powers given to the Online Gaming Authority. We discussed that in the first panel as well. Dhruv said that in the short term, he thinks that it's not a problem if the power is vested within MeitY, where at least for user grievances, the IT secretary remains the final authority. And otherwise also, and for like promotion of the industry, from a business perspective, it makes sense for it to remain within MeitY. Do you think that makes sense, especially from an adjudication perspective?
See, on adjudication perspective, we discussed with you briefly yesterday, and I've done some in other industry context. These interministerial appeals are a farce, if you ask me. Right? I'm not talking about this particular ministry. It was some other ministry where, it is a pre-decided situation, right? So that appeal is not, and there have been some cases where appeal has not been considered as an effective remedy, as an alternate, which is interdepartmental. There are some cases in certain situations the courts have stated. So suppose I'm not happy, just to take this example, right? if I'm not happy with the decision of, say, authority, my next level is Menti secretary, right? But if I believe that I want to, this is serious issue, I want to hasten my, sort of remedy, whatever I'm facing today. For example, my game has been banned. Okay, because the authority does have the power to say, I will stop you, right, if you're violated. And one other interesting thing which I would want to point out, that I can be banned even if I violate some other law.
What
I don't think that you have noticed, right? In this, there is that registration can be cancelled. I think one of the provisions somewhere it says, if I'm violating other law also, then I'm gone, right? So, some of these issues that have come out in the rules. So coming back, what happens is I want an urgent relief, stay on that order or otherwise. And I believe I'm going to waste time going, in the interdepartmental appeals. I file a writ directly, because if you see in the act and the rules, there is no further appeal provided, no second appeal provided. So my remedy is in writ. So there have been some cases, right up to the Supreme Court, where it has been stated that if you believe that your interdepartmental appeal is not going to be an effective, efficacious remedy, right? It has to be effective and efficacious remedy, then you can directly go in a writ. So you could have this situation where, if at all I believe that I need an immediate stay, etc., and having an appeal and all that is, going to waste my time, I could end up going in a writ to get an immediate stay, where the court may tell me that, okay, I'm giving you stay, but you go in appeal. So I see a lot of this back and forth, and I've encountered this in under other laws as well, where there is this interministerial appeals, interdepartmental appeals, right? Because if you see, the authorities attached to the ministry, right?
Yeah.
So it will be treated as interdepartmental appeal in that case, right? So therefore, unfortunately, you could have situation of back and forth with the court remanding, getting a stay, things like that, unfortunately. So I just want to point that out here.
Got it. And I think I'm sure of this, but if you can just clarify, both users can go to the IT secretary, the appellate, who's the appellate authority.
It is a 3-level process for both.
For users as well as an online game service provider, if they're not happy with the determination decision. Got it. Now, coming to the question of determination and recognition and registration, which is something we discussed at length in panel 1. It's pretty clear that the Act given option of voluntary registration for OSGs has not been provided for in the rules. So and this is something that Dhruv talked about at length, Rachana and Pooja also talked about at length, about financial institutions still asking for it. Sarthak gave one model that could work. How will it work?
Yeah, so, if you look at rules 18 and 19, I think that is where the financial institutions should make an effort to make representation to the authority, because the authority can give them some guidance. If you see on, when they have to undertake any financial transaction. So one point, I think it was in your report or some other report, the question when you say financial transaction, I want to also point out one element here. Before I fully answer that question, when you say financial transaction, is it only on user side or also on the payout side? So suppose it's a free-to-play game and I'm giving rewards, right? It's not it's not a stake game, right? Keeping aside what Meiti feels and all of that, keeping that aside, it's a not OMG online money game. So for a payout also, whether the financial institutions have to take care or it's only money coming in. So one of the reports I saw that the intention really is on the user side pay-ins, and that's how the rule vaguely reads. But anyway, coming back, the financial institutions can make a representation to the government, to the authority rather, and get more clarity, because otherwise they are going to be stuck, whenever there is subscription fee, for example, right? Subscription fee is permissible, and there are no rewards. But because it's a money in from the user side, they'll have to be careful, right? So if you really see, there is a authority giving direction under 8.3, which is indicated in your rules 18 and 19, correct? One other element, what I've realized is that, rather business models that are developing, people are clubbing the services, content plus game.
I think
Correct.
someone asked that question in
Yeah.
panel one, that if there is an online stream going on and they're offering vouchers, coupons,
No,
etc.
that is one. That
Yeah.
is one. I'm saying many subscription elements is content plus playing the game.
Can you give an example just so that
For
it's
example, suppose I will not take platform names, but there are platforms. So I will pay monthly subscription of 100 rupees.
Huh.
Okay. I get content such as Netflix or otherwise. I get to watch the content, but I also get to play the games.
Oh, like Netflix offering games on the mobile app or others.
Right? Some other, whatever. So there is money in. There is no money out, fine, but there is money in and there are games.
Got
Correct?
it.
So then the question arises that, when you say financial institutions doing due diligence, it is not only just the gaming companies coming to them, but anybody and everybody. You gave, another example, spin the wheel. Technically, if there is a reward attached to that, right, and if there is a due diligence expected, it's not only the gaming companies who are coming to them for financial transaction. It could be anything and everybody who has gaming as one element of their entire service. So your due diligence now suddenly is becoming wider.
Now, what if you are a financial institution and you are offering arguably what could be classified as other stakes? For instance, credit card points.
Yeah.
HDFC or like HDFC would still be a direct issuer and
There
issuer.
is no game, right? There is no game.
Something like cred.
No, but are they game? No, that's what. So anything which has a game element will have to be looked at with caution. That's all I'm saying.
What is a game element?
I think Dhruv mentioned, right, there is some interactivity. So if yeah.
Sarthak did.
Yeah. So it is more of interactivity, and there have been cases, in fact, very old cases where it has been stated as betting is not necessarily gaming.
Okay.
So suppose you are and I betting, I really hope it rains in Mumbai. It's horrible weather. So you and I bet that tomorrow whether it will rain.
We'll put it on Polymarket.
Okay, so that is where we are simply betting. But will betting amount to gaming?
As
So
per the government guess, which is how they got Polymarket.
No. So that's the word. So there have been old cases that gaming is an independent. It's an interactive activity where the player has to take some action to play. Okay, whereas betting is independent of that. So coming to the main act itself, now I'm not wanting to digress the conversation from the rules, but the main act itself, that there is a question mark whether betting simpliciter is considered under that act or not, because there is no gaming. It bases the old case laws.
So I'm looking at the definition of esport, and that excludes placing of bets, wagers, or any other stakes by any person, whether or not such person is a participant, including any winning out of such bets, wagers, or any other stakes. So bets are excluded from esports.
Yeah.
Then we go to online social game, where it says may allow access through payment of a subscription fee or one-time access fee, provided that such payment is not in the nature of a stake or wager.
That's okay, but that is from a definition perspective to say, but it is still the original element is a game, right? So that is the whole definition is online game, because these are categories of online game, and the definition of a game is not given in the act.
Yes, online game is given, which is why we were confused.
Yeah.
Where I was like,
and that is why I think they mentioned, so somewhere that jurisprudence will need to see how it evolves.
Does previous jurisprudence even have value given this act?
Now there are old cases distinguishing, as I said, between betting and gaming activity. Now we need to see, these are really old cases, so we need to see how this regulator looks into it.
Got it. Because the government hasn't been very keen to get into the question of skill versus chance at all.
Right. But it's not a question of skill versus chance. It is more about game or no game. That's it.
I mean, it's one of those things where if you put two lawyers in the room, they can argue two different ways and come to completely different conclusions. But what about foreign operators' operations in India, and not pari-match kinds?
Yeah.
The kosher ones.
See now, if you see the act contemplates that there could be a registration of a foreign operator. That is clear. I think one of the panel members said that, which is clear, right? So there could be a situation where a foreign operator offers kosher game directly into India. Correct? There is also some provision, if I remember correctly, Rule 16 or something, where they contemplate appointment of some officer, etc. Now we need to wait and watch whether they, like we saw in the IT rules, right? That you need somebody, localized in India, some representation, things like that. We don't know. So that's why what you said is right, is delegated. So a lot of things may get clearer there. So we don't know. So that is point number one. Point number two, if you see current account transaction rules under Foreign Exchange Management Act, there are certain prohibitions on the remittances, right? And if you see the wording there, it's little vague. Okay, to say that, remittance for gaming and whatever, even hobby, they use the word hobby and things like that is prohibited. Now we'll need to wait and watch as to how the financial operator, the banks or whoever, making the payments. Thus far, we know that even UPI was being taken for these foreign operators. I don't know how they managed it. I know, but anyway. So, so basically, the question will be that how the FEMA will be interpreted, whether they will allow these monies to be sent out under the current account rules, or they will get some guidance to say, okay, if the games are registered or recognized, such payments may be permissible. So I think the banks will require some guidance from the Reserve Bank of India on this.
Okay. I did not know about this hobby thing at all, and I'm just looking up the
Got that, right?
remittance scheme, and it mentions or any other hobby, not or any other such hobby, but or any other
hobby. Yeah. So what is hobby? What is so?
Like, hobby, is my yarn going to be?
Yeah. So we don't know, right? I mean, how? And see, because there is a huge, there is a criminal liability under the act. We come back to the same point, right? These, even though foreign operator may be permissible, right? If they get registration, nothing like it, because at least right?
But they can't opt for voluntary registration until
we can't go exactly, right? So, but for all you know, the government may decide if a foreign operator wants to offer in India, all of them may need to get registration. You don't know, right? So they may do so, because that is one of the criteria, right, to be considered for making that registration compulsory. So if that is done, I think that could be a better way forward, because the financial institution, because see, foreign operators has been one of the biggest issues that the entire industry, Indian industry, has sort of suffered because of them, right? And even lot of, issues that were pointed out of money laundering or, whatever, no player protection. Lot of this was related to, some of these underground things that were happening on Signal and things like that, right? I mean, I think, no, Telegram, whatever, huh? So some of these which you pointed out in the earlier, panel discussion. So lot of these things which were happening, I don't think it can really stop overnight, correct? Because I think that was one of the questions you asked. But if there is a registration process that is made mandatory, at least consumer awareness can be created. One of the biggest issues that we are missing out in the entire conversation is the consumer awareness, to say, because of this law now, at least, that can be sort of done, to say that only if, foreign payments, if they are registered. So a lot of these can be, that can be managed by this registration process for the foreign operators, is what my initial impression is.
So because this is not just restricted to OMGs are banned. They are illegal as of May 1.
Yeah, but there are a lot of others, right? I mean, lot of games which are provided where I make the payments, like buying and all of that, right?
Xbox Store. If I'm buying a game from Xbox Store, one is that the government comes out and says under Rule 12, one of the parameters that the OGA can consider, central government can consider, is country of origin or the head office of the online game service provider.
Correct.
So it can say that any company whose head office is in the United States of America must be registered. So would that then mean that until Xbox is registered with the government in India, I can't buy Xbox games?
No. So I'm not saying that. I'm talking more about the games which are where you are sort of making these continuous payments and things like that, right?
So
yeah, exactly. No, so I mean, depending upon, because if you see the criteria, right, there are multiple things that the government will take into account.
Yeah.
For example, some of these, games which are known to be multiplayer games or whatever, these type of games, they may not really bother about, because thus far they have not bothered about. Correct? If you really see there, they will be more bothered about age rating, age gating, etc. Right? So we will need to see what is the mischief that what types of games are likely to create, and basis that create some kind of controls. For example, if there are say poker game is offered from abroad, free to play, okay, but there are prizes. So if that is the case, the government may want to have an oversight to say, okay, let me just have some oversight if this is being done. So it completely depends on what is the risk categorization, that is one of the areas also to be considered. Depending upon that, there is a possibility, you can use the rules for that purpose for foreign operators.
Got it. I think we're running out of time, and we also want to get some audience questions in. I will ask you one last thing, which is about delegated legislation. Does that lead to regulatory uncertainty?
It does.
Oh, that was quick. And the other part of this question is the manner in which this act was brought about. There was not a lot of protest against it, partly because this industry, there was a certain moral stance taken by the government.
Yeah.
And there was a bipartisan or rather omnipartisan stance taken by government opposition at large.
Yeah.
So there were ethical concerns raised about the industry, moral concerns, moral panic made. Right, wrong, I won't get into that. But nobody really said, ooh, bad idea. And this was like between the introduction before the cabinet to appearance in the Gazette, less than 72 hours had lapsed.
Yeah.
One of the key that had always been with regulation of online gaming was who has jurisdiction, states or center. But the center it definitely sidestepped it by invoking national security.
Yeah.
So A, the manner in which this act was brought about practically overnight, and B, by invoking national security to wrest jurisdiction from states and claim seventh schedule power over the matter. What does that bode for other kind of lawmaking, not just from MeitY, but elsewhere as well? Because I could argue national security anywhere.
No, you're right. So they invoked, that entry 52 under, their, 7th schedule, list 1, right? And they said that. So I think the challenge is before the Supreme Court. We need to wait and watch what happens against Proca as well, as you know. We will need to wait and watch also that whether the state law challenges that were pending, whether the Supreme Court concludes that whether skill or chance, it doesn't matter, the power rests with the state under XYZ entry, then the question will be that if they have invoked 52, then what happens? There is a very interesting interplay, concurrent list comes in and all of that. I don't want to, over complicate things here, but we will need to see what happens now in those matters. And suddenly, if the Supreme Court turns around and say that, it is not, Proga is not valid, or state has the powers, then that will throw industry in a complete tizzy after that, right? So
what is the likelihood of the Supreme Court taking such an adverse view to?
I don't think so that will happen, right? But because the state challenges were argued before, we'll need to see, and because the state high courts have stated that even for skill, the state has the power under XYZ entries, right? So we will need to see what happens there. But somewhere, even same thing happened, if you remember, for some of the other laws. I forget which one, but if the stay is not granted by the court, the matter continues, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, right? So we need to wait and watch there. But like Tanoga and all of that became totally irrelevant after this law came in, right?
Yeah, got it. And will we see the government amending IT rules to get rid of this additional weight of GI?
That's like every time there is an amendment, I'm waiting to see whether that gets deleted, but it continues. I don't know why.
Why? But anyway, thank you, Gowree. Thank you so much. We will open the floor to questions. Ananay Jain has a question about, do we have active court cases against Proga? Is there still hope for judiciary stepping in and helping RMG industry?
So there is a challenge pending before the Supreme Court, that has been pushed ahead because the GST ruling and the state ruling was still pending. Uh, it is expected sometime in this month. We'll need to wait and watch what happens after that. But yes, the challenge is pending.
Got it. There's a question from Shrey Gupta. As the current rules, there is lack of clarity as to how money can be taken by gaming companies to participate in social games. And therefore, how does the government wish to push entrepreneurs to develop such games?
Yeah. So I think in the first session there was some discussion, but just to clarify, for example, ad-supported games, right? Then there are models where people are saying that you watch the ad, I will not watch the ad and play the game. Then for an ads-free experience, I will make the payment, subscription payment, right? But subscription payment, when there should not be any prizes, right? Because then it amounts to money in, money out, correct? Then you have in-game purchases, right? So there are different models people are already exploring. The thumb rule is money in, money out. Having a correlation is a problem. Keeping that aside, some of these models are evolving, which I mentioned.
Okay. Pankaj Rajgor just made a point. I'm assuming this is what the question would be. What happens to the real money gaming balances lying in escrow amount?
That's an important point. And, in fact, I have handled cases where, multiple representations have been made to MeitY to clarify the position. MeitY is not taking any view on that, unfortunately, because if you really see, in the draft rules, they did have some language there, right? But now that language is taken out. I think they realize that it has nothing to do with Proga, right? So some people are sort of, waiting for the players to take the money back and then are making the payment. So insofar as there is a question also that whether Proga will stop such payouts, the answer in my view is no. You can still continue the payouts. Some people have forcibly, sent the money back to the accounts wherever they had the information about the players, right? But I know that people are still sitting on cash and they have no idea what is to be done. And I'll tell you one of the difficulties, if your user terms and conditions may allow you to forfeit, right? Because I'm sure there will be provisions where say that if you don't take money in spite of reminder, we may forfeit or whatever it may be, right? If you forfeit that money, it becomes your income and you need to pay tax on that. That is one from a tax perspective. But the other issue is you are seeing that every day there is some PMLA investigation, ED raid, etc. on the gaming companies, right? The question will be that whether if you forfeit that money and show that as your income, tomorrow, somebody may say that you have illegally forfeited this particular amount, right? So this is one area where I feel government should give clarity to the gaming companies. Some gaming companies are going for liquidation, okay, because they don't want to continue the business. If they're going for liquidation, the best case is to let the official liquidator decide what is to be done with that money, so long as you have the data as to whoever is whichever user account and all, you will already have that data, right? Then the official liquidator will take that call, right? But if you're continuing the company, okay, and you don't know what is to be done, I think I would request EGF to make that representation and give that clarity. In fact, in one of the matters, I also said that can we give that charity money to charity? I will not forfeit. Okay, what is to be done? Give me some clarity.
Go to PM Cares Fund. That's probably what the courts would rule.
A fund, for player protection or whatever it may be, right? So
PM Cares Fund. That's where all the money goes.
No, but this clarity is required for sure, because I would not recommend at this stage where we stand today. I would not recommend to forfeit, even if your terms and conditions say so. Please make a representation and get that clarity. I know that MeitY may not be in a position to give that clarity, so get clarity from MHA, get that clarity from Finance Ministry, whatever it may be. But unless the government gives that clarity, at least as of now, I would not recommend forfeiting that money, even as I said before. I mean, we need to wait it out.
Yeah. Interesting that you mentioned that everyday game companies are being rated by ED, etc. Today, Gamescraft,
Yeah.
the founders have, I think, been arrested. I'm just going to press release.
I
Yeah.
don't know, sometimes they say arrested, but then it's only an inquiry. So I don't want to.
No, official ED thing says that two of the founders were arrested from NCR region and thereafter transit remand has been obtained for producing them before Bangalore jurisdictional court. Further, the third founder was arrested from Bangalore and has been produced before jurisdictional court. Further investigation is under progress and searches were carried out at 17 locations, blah, blah, blah. Oh, this is Gamescraft. Yeah.
That is why I say, right? Don't. I mean, I don't think it's wise to forfeit at this stage.
No, but there seems to be for
No, I know there are. See, what I'm trying to say is there may be some other allegations or otherwise, right?
Mhm.
But because currently the sensitivity is very heightened, and especially the player money, let's not touch it for the time being.
got it. And the
Mm,
last question
Clarity. Yeah.
from audience is from Sarthak Bansal. We are launching real money gaming in other countries apart from India. Can we manage the operations from India? I think this was addressed on panel 1 as well. To some
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is something I had in fact asked Mehdi directly, including that GCC question, right? But the question really is now the ODI. If you really see, the overseas direct investment rules are not allowing you to make, create subsidiaries in the gambling sector. So if it is gambling, now the question is, what is gambling? Question mark. Right? Earlier in India, we had clarity, skill versus chance. But with this law coming in, whether the government will treat even skill gaming as gambling and therefore, consider for the ODI purpose that it's a prohibited activity, right? So this clarity is required from the government for sure. But if you're simply doing a GCC activity, which is, basically outsourcing activity to put it simply, I don't see that as an issue. But if you're investing abroad, that you have to be careful.
okay.
Yeah.
So a lot is unknown. Do you think all this uncertainty allows the government essentially to go after whoever they dislike?
I wouldn't say dislike, but I mean, just opens unnecessary, what really industry needs is a certainty and clarity, right? So this unfortunately is not clear and certain at this stage, and for the questions that you asked. So that is where I believe DPIIT and others, should step in and give that clarity and certainty, because these are real concerns. Because even in the earlier regime, I know that there were several questions raised even for the outsourcing industries. There was ED questioning, there was income tax questioning and the like, right? Even for the outsourcing companies. So that is likely to enhance more, if at all. Right. So this is something I had actually written to Mehdi to say that please give this clarity that you can continue to operate outsourcing services in India. So that, because see, if you're looking at investment also on the one hand, if DPIIT is promoting investment, they should give that clarity.
Got it. Got it. That's all we had, Gowree. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure.
Thank you, Devu, for having all of us. Thank you to Dhruv, Pooja, Rachana, and Sarthak from panel 1. And thank you for all of you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aditi. Thank you so much, Gowree, for this masterclass. And thank you to all of those dedicated 25 people, 30 people who stayed back for this masterclass right till the very end. A shout out to Adhika. Thank you so much for your very warm compliments, and thank you. Thanks, Adhika. We look forward to hosting you more in further sessions. Thank you so much, Gowree. As always, we're always grateful to you for making the time for us and for, participating in this education building exercises, awareness building exercises. So we're very grateful to you for your time and for this master class that you always deliver. Thank you so much.
It was lovely listening to the first panel as well. Glad I joined in before.
Thank you all for joining once again. And we will put out the recording on our YouTube channel. So please feel free to refer it later on. And we will also keep hosting similar sessions. So please watch out for those as well on our social media platforms. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.